Why would I look to adopt them into my practices? What are the benefits to me of doing that?
Well, perfect timing for a question like that. I would answer that question with a question, which is, wow, how's your fertilizer supplies and costs going right now?
Yeah. Thank you, Andrew Millison, for joining the Holy Crop podcast. Really great to talk to you again. It'd be great if you could just start by giving little bit of background about permaculture, what it is, why you find it so fascinating, and how you managed to find a job that takes you all around the world, learning from really inspiring people and teaching as well some of these things.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that's a very multi-pronged question there. So I'll do my best. Thanks so much for having me on, Michael and Daniel. Really appreciate talking to you. And we were just looking at the map. You're there at 64 degrees north latitude, which is closer to the Arctic Circle than I've ever been. So permaculture is a land design system that was developed in Australia by Bill Mollison and David Holmgren back in the late 70s, early 80s. And basically, it came out of this question of how do we create an agricultural systems that are permanent. Now, permanent is a funny word because the universe is impermanent, right? I mean, but in the scope of our lifetimes, permanence really is looking at how do we not deplete water resources, degrade soils, destroy ecologies, degrade human culture, degrade natural systems while growing our own food. So how can we create a system that provides for the things that we need, not just food, water, energy, building materials, medicines, all the things that humans need to survive? How do we generate and create those things while simultaneously increasing the resource base, increasing natural systems, increasing water supplies, increasing soil fertility, right? So that's the aim of permaculture, is to have regenerative systems that actually create more resources by their use, okay? So a lot of work was put into developing this permaculture system that really accomplishes those goals. It's an ethically based system with a series of principles that are followed and a whole bunch of design tools that are used to accomplish that in every climate on the planet. Now, it's developed in Australia. Australia is the driest continent on Earth. So there is a real need for these systems because soils and resources deplete very quickly in such a dry and old landscape as Australia. But the system has been developed and designed where there are tools and techniques for every climate zone on Earth. So where you are in, the far north there in Norway, you're going to have a whole bunch of different tools, techniques, strategies that are going to be different from someplace, let's say, in the equatorial tropics or in the subtropical deserts of the world, or where I live at 45 degrees north latitude. I'm still in the temperate zone, but I'm quite a bit south of you. We get a lot more warm weather than you do and a lot more daylight in the wintertime. So it's this design. So in a way, you could think of it as this set of lenses that you put on in which to see the place that you are and to develop design strategies for creating the basis of human survival, which is very much focused on food and water, of course, in each different environment that you are. So that was the first part of the question, was what is permaculture? I guess the second part was, how did I get to end up doing what I'm doing? Was that?
Yeah, having, you're rubbing our noses in it by living at 45 degrees and just pointing out how much nicer the winters are. Just as our snow is clearing here. But I mean, I guess the question is, how did you get attracted to study permaculture, and then how have you managed to make a living out of doing what you're doing, which is effectively traveling around the world and advising and consulting on permaculture?
Yeah. So when I was a young man back in the early 90s, I realized that our civilization was set up to fall, basically. That we had a depletion model. We were depleting natural resources, we were competing over resources, and that things were set up in a way that was just not sustainable. We did not have the ability to sustain long term. So, I had this revelation. I was like, wow, nothing is like this is, we're going in a bad direction. And so when I came across permaculture, I guess first I was traveling around the United States. This is back in the early 90s. And I came across the earth ships, which are these tire houses designed by this guy, Michael Reynolds. I was in Taos, New Mexico, and I was like, whoa, these earth ships are these self-sufficient pods that collect their own water, and you're recycling wastewater, gray water in the system, and then growing food. And my scope of like how much food you could grow in an earth ship and how much food someone actually needed to survive, I did not have that perspective yet. So I thought like, wow, all I need to do to survive all of the changes of civilization is just to learn how to build one of these earth ships, build an earth ship, and then I had my own little spaceship pod that could survive whatever was happening, right? That was my naivete.
With Dr. Spock on it as well, doing all your planting and seeding for you.
Exactly, right. The concept that you could just have your little pod, your self-sufficient pod, and you didn't have to really deal with the rest of the world. So at that point I went back to college. I had dropped out of college and was traveling around. I went back to college and I ended up at a wonderful environmental university or college in Prescott, Arizona, called Prescott College. And they had ecological design classes there, and they had permaculture classes. I'd never heard of permaculture, but a bunch of my friends that were a year ahead of me took this permaculture class. They went out to some sites in southern Arizona and came back and were like, permaculture, it's the way. And they started building this garden at the college's permaculture garden, and I was absolutely intrigued. So 1996, 30 years ago right now, I went and I took my permaculture design course down in Tucson, Arizona, which I'm actually going to Tucson, Arizona tomorrow to do some filming with one of my teachers from my permaculture design course 30 years ago, a guy by the name of Brad Lancaster, who's written some really excellent books on rainwater harvesting for dry lands and beyond. And so I studied permaculture in the dry lands, and I was just hooked. Right? And I gained the perspective that, of how to see the world from the permaculture perspective, from the watershed perspective, the bioregional perspective, to see the world and the ecology and the interconnectedness of nature that sits below, underlying our human imposed national boundaries and our human imposed land management units, right? So it opened my eyes, and I realized at that point 30 years ago that permaculture is really what I wanted to focus my life's energies on. And so as far as how I got to where I am now, I mean, the thing that actually gets me traveling around the world right now more than doing design and consultation work is doing filming, is documenting and educating about permaculture sites. So I've done some traveling around doing consultation, but that's not really what gets me around the world right now. It's actually locating the projects that they don't need my consultation. They're already doing incredible work, and then going and really doing a deep dive, studying what those projects are doing, how they're successful, what are the strategies and techniques they're using in different climates and different ecological and geographical conditions that they're in, and then telling the story of those projects. So that's primarily what I'm focused on now. And education, I mean, I have this big online permaculture design program that I've developed through Oregon State University. I've been I've been teaching at Oregon State University now since 2009, so that's 17 years, and I've developed this whole online permaculture program. And so the developing online educational content led me into developing video documentaries. They're sort of one and the same, because in a way, education, there's a certain component to education that's storytelling. So in a sense, storytelling is my primary focus.
Yeah, it's pretty impressive to have a million views on on YouTube. When you think it's still really a small subset of people that actually know what permaculture is and are interested in it. So it's pretty phenomenal to have that level of eyes on your video. In reality, it's really impressive.
Well, and actually, my YouTube channel right now has over 100 million views.
100 million.
100 million views on my videos. So it's like it's out there,
Yeah, that's insane. And one of the points you made about when you were studying, it's sort of similar. I guess we're a similar age. And when I was at I went to art college, and what I found really interesting there, I did environmental design as well. But what's really interesting is that all of the systems are linear systems. So you have a design process where something is designed, it's made, it's used, and then it's just disposed of, because the design process ends with the usage of something. So there's no circular elements to it. So you have a product is made, and you look at that and just go, at what point do we run out of resources? Where do they go? What do we do with all of this stuff? And there's and what I find a bit amazing is, as you say, it's sort of 30 years on, the process is still the same. When we still haven't really designed for reuse. It's we're still just designing for low cost, disposable, throwaway society, because that's people shop in cheap shops. They buy cheap, they buy many times, they use once, throw it away. It's a strange setup when you try to explain it to an alien.
I know. Yeah, and now we're in like late stage capitalism, basically. And of course, right now we're at day 20 of the great oil resource war.
Yeah.
So I mean, here we are. All of the things that drew me to permaculture back in the 90s are very rapidly coming to a head.
Yeah.
And God willing, this is our great wake-up call that we actually need to, like, I've seen some interesting things on social media. People are saying, finally, everybody's going, we need to use renewable energy, because not because of the necessarily good reasons that we would think of taking care of the earth, but because of, say, national security reasons. We're like, well, I'm glad that you arrived at that conclusion, although I would like you to arrive at that conclusion because you want goodness.
Yeah.
No, I was just saying, because I was thinking, how could we help them with that revelation? What was yours? What book was it, or what happened?
You mean the sort of original revelation?
Yeah, yours in the 90s there.
Well, I mean, the Permaculture Designer's Manual was a huge influence when I came across. I mean, well, I'd say, first off, the Earthship books were the first thing. Like I said, Michael Reynolds had this series of books. When I saw those books, I was like, ding, this little light bulb went off. Now, when I took my permaculture design course and I got the Permaculture Designer's Manual, which is like the big black book of permaculture, I mean, and I started paging through and seeing these different designs for all over the planet and all these water systems and energy systems and forest systems, and that was just absolutely eye-opening in a lot of ways. So those two books, I mean, I could list a lot of books that were very influential on me. Later on, Permaculture Principles and Pathways Beyond Sustainability, that was David Holmgren's 2004 kind of consolidation of a lot of the permaculture principles that Bill Mollison put forth. That had a lot of impact. Yeah. Now I don't even, I read mostly fiction now.
Not permaculture fiction.
I'm really right now. I'm really into Dune. You know,
Yeah,
the
okay.
whole like extended Dune series, which is just a deep, deep work that encompasses many of the thoughts of permaculture and AI. And,
Yeah.
Frank Herbert was just like, I can't believe this stuff was written in 1965. I mean, he was just a man ahead of his time. I think he probably took a lot of LSD. I'm not sure how he knew what he knew back then, but it's pretty extraordinary. Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry, tangenting off there.
So if somebody wants to go from 0 to 1, if they've found out have the same semi-revelation that this thing is not sustainable, how can and wants to do their part, where would you start?
Yeah. Well, taking a permaculture design course is a really great place to start. Getting some permaculture books. I mean, because permaculture is a roadmap to how we can actually design our way back to a connection with nature. Now, there is a lot of traditional ecological knowledge out there. Now, in Norway, I imagine that there are practices that are still being used there that are age-old practices of the traditional ecological knowledge of Norway. I'm just guessing, but you are basically in Norway, you're basically an indigenous people that are still living on their land for the most part. So I'd imagine that there's traditional ecological knowledge that have come through to this day that are sustainable practices. And we can look all over the world at indigenous people that are still living on their land. And for people that still have their traditional sustainable practices, permaculture is not really needed if it's working. However, a lot of people in the world, I don't know if it's a majority of the world or what the percentage is, have lost their way, have lost their traditional ecological knowledge and how you actually survive and produce the things you need in a sustainable way. So permaculture is a roadmap that people can follow that have lost their way back to having practices that are harmonious with nature. So in that way, I feel like if someone is feeling lost and they don't have any traditional basis for returning to a balance with nature, permaculture is a wonderful roadmap that can, you kind of follow, and it's a protocol for how you can see the world and then design the world back into a harmonious state.
But playing devil's advocate a little bit,
Yeah.
if I'm a farmer and I'm a grain farmer or a potato farmer, I've got a main crop, typically a single sort of main crop. I'm using pesticides, I'm using herbicides, I'm using fertilizers. I've gone down the sort of industrial, small scale but industrial farming route. Why would I consider permaculture as the principles of permaculture? Why would I look to adopt them into my practices? What are the benefits to me of doing that?
Well, perfect timing for a question like that. I would answer that question with a question, which is, wow, how's your fertilizer supplies and costs going right now?
Yeah.
Is there a ship stuck in the Straits of Hormuz waiting to come and bring the fertilizers to the fjords of Norway? Where do you get your fertilizers from? Fertilizers are a petrochemical product. So
Yeah.
right now we can see the fragility of that system, right? Which is just the import side of that. And then I would talk about your soil health. How's your soil health? And is your soil a dead medium that requires fertilizers and requires pesticides and herbicides in order to sort of make up for the imbalance of nature that has created the imbalance of pests in your system? And how long can you just add external inputs to your soil and to your system to keep it going? And what are the larger systems that that's dependent on? And how fragile are you really?
Yeah.
So,
I mean, I guess it's for them, it's a known proven way of working. They know the farm, they know the land, they've got a structured way of working. That's what they do, and how they do it. And I think with a lot of these things, there's as you're saying, there's external factors, which is you just can't get fertilizers anymore, or if you can, you're going to be paying 2, 3, 4 times the price for it. So economics alone can be driving these things. But and over the years, the more you use pesticides and fertilizers, the more you degrade soil health, the more you need fertilizers in particular to be able to do it, and pest control increases as well. So I'm just wondering, from the work that you've done, is it more of a mindset thing? Do you see that actually people just go, for the longer term, I need to be doing something differently, I just don't know what that is and how to get started on it? Is it that, or is it just I need to reduce my cost and I can't risk the yield because that's all I have from an economic point of view?
Yeah. Well, I would say that economics are more of a driving force than anything for the common person. I feel like there's a small percentage of the people that have a kind of larger vision of the world and will do these things, will try to reduce their inputs and use locally based fertilizers or botanical insecticides and all these things. They will try to create a sustainable farming system because it's the right thing to do in their perspective. But that is a minority. The most successful projects that I've seen in the world that have really spread deep into populations and changed the practices of the common farmer are incentivizing those people through economics, right?
Yeah.
People just naturally are going to do things for their own well-being more than they are for the universal well-being, the majority of the people, right? So,
yeah,
I mean, I can give you some examples of really successful projects that have spread to a vast scale and the economic incentives involved in them.
Yeah, I mean, I think that is key, isn't it? Is basically, how do you reward farmers that are adopting best practice when it comes to land management and biodiversity and ecology and those types of practices. So yeah, what things have you seen then that have worked?
I'll tell you a couple. Here's an interesting one. This is a project I documented down in South India, and it is in a watershed called the Kaveri River. So it's the Kaveri River Basin. It's one of the biggest watersheds in South India, and it's a watershed that has been greatly deforested because of agricultural pressures, clearing fields and spreading, and then pressures on forests and such. And so there's an organization called the Isha Foundation that's based down in Coimbatore, South India. Sadhguru, he's kind of like a famous spiritual teacher in the world. You might have seen videos of him, but his organization is called the Isha Foundation. And they were like, okay, how do we get back to having 1/3 of the landscape in tree cover? 1/3 of the landscape in tree cover is what we feel like is the baseline. It's what the government of India feels like is the baseline for having a stable hydrologic cycle. Right? Is you need 1/3 of that landscape in tree cover. Is that the same for Norway? I don't know. It's at least for that area, that's what was determined. So they're like, well, this is such a farming zone. Basically, how do we incentivize farmers to get trees incorporated into their fields, into their farms? So it has to be, how is it a financial incentive? So they said, instead of just having field crops, people are growing, in rice in the wetter areas, or they're growing millets in drier areas, and all lots of different crops down there. How do we incorporate trees in that landscape in a profitable way for farmers? Well, they actually were like incorporated. They started promoting and producing trees that could be cut for timber on a long-term rotation. So they started getting farmers to plant trees within their fields that every generation, say 30 years, those trees could be harvested and you would get a generational windfall of money that instead of going year by year, annual crops, sort of generative, you're putting the money in, you're getting the crop out, but if you have a crop failure, you have no security, and then you're never able to like really get ahead. So they incorporated basically agroforestry, timber-based agroforestry, where they got farmers to start planting trees on rotation. So they're planting trees and then they are cutting those trees, but they're planting more trees. So they're having a continual portion of their farm under tree cover. And this has been, this practice has been introduced to large scale areas, producing nurseries, making tree seedlings, and the information available very cheaply. And now the overall average tree cover of this entire water basin is increasing steadily year on year with the introduction of this profitable production method that also is increasing biodiversity, is also decreasing temperatures, and decreasing wind erosion and soil erosion, all the benefits that you get from planting trees, basically.
Yeah.
So there's economic incentive through the farmers' well-being and economics. They were able to actually increase the tree cover of an entire watershed in a permanent fashion.
But that came from government or county level, that funding.
Well, it came from this spiritual organization, basically.
Okay.
So yeah,
and it's self-financing as well, right? Because you plant the trees and then you harvest them later on. So it's not like subsidies for having hedgerows in place or something.
Right. So basically, what it allowed was that now, about once in a generation, every farmer has a windfall of cash when they do a harvest that they can then, if you've ever been to an Indian wedding, I mean, you can fund a wedding. You could fund an equipment purchase. You could fund You could fund a college tuition for a child. Like, it gave you this big pulse of money, so generationally you could do some big expansion or investment.
I have been to an Indian wedding. I think it went on for 3 weeks.
So financial incentive, and I could tell you other examples if you want to go that direction, or let me know.
Yeah, because we've been thinking a lot on how to stimulate more regenerative agriculture and those type of principles here, because there is a lot of monocropping going on. We only have less than 4% aggregated land in Norway, and there's mostly monocropping going on. So I also saw your series on that Pani Foundation.
The Pani Foundation, yeah,
with a water cup thing that
we
got going there. That's a beautiful one. Could you tell people a little bit about that, and what can we learn from that, and possibly use not just nationally here in Norway, but in general in the world to stimulate more?
Yeah. So that again is in India, in the state of Maharashtra, which is a large state. Over, I think, something like 130 million people live there. I mean, we're talking about a big area, a lot of people, and they were experiencing severe water shortages on the village level. India gets a monsoon, so 3 months of rain, 4 months of rain, and then 8 or 9 months of extremely dry, very hot weather. So if you're only growing with the monsoon rains, you get one crop a year. Well, what if you have a crop failure? What if the rains don't come, or what if you have off-season rains that destroy your crop? So it's very marginal. And so a lot of times farmers, basically, when you get into the dry season, they run out of money, they run out of water, and they need to migrate. They have to go into Mumbai, live in the slums, work low-wage jobs, or become migratory farm laborers and travel around and live in kind of poor conditions and work. But there were some villages that seemed like they did not have water problems. It seemed like their groundwater was not running out, and they were really prosperous. And so this Bollywood star named Amir Khan, who is incredibly famous. I don't know who the most famous leading male movie star is in Norway. Who would you say?
Let's say just Axel Hennie for kicks and giggles.
What's his name?
Axel Hennie.
Okay, so this is like the Axel Hennie of India, right? Or the Tom Cruise of American cinema. Okay, so this is like major leading male, many movies under his belt. So Amir Khan got tuned into this water problem in the state of Maharashtra, and also got tuned into the fact that there was villages that somehow miraculously were not having these water problems. So they realized that these villages had figured out how to fix their watersheds, reforest, collect water, and build their water tables. And so they actually created a contest between villages to see. So they brought representatives from each of the villages that were part of this contest, and they taught them about watershed restoration. And then they held a contest, a 45-day contest, to see which village could install the most amount of water harvesting structures in that 45-day period. And over a period of 4 or 5 years, they ran that contest. They had 8,000 villages participate in this contest. Each village has probably about 2,000 people. So you're talking about 16 million people participating in this. What's the population of Norway? Do you know?
Yeah, 6 million.
6 million.
5-6 million. Yeah.
So we're talking about like substantially more people than the entire nation of Norway that are participating in this contest. And the results were dramatic, because when you go and you do this watershed scale restoration, digging all of these structures that are collecting the water, soaking the water into the ground, then suddenly you have your water table building up in just one rainy season. You put all the structures in place, the monsoons come, and then the water soaks in, and within one season, you've rebuilt your subsurface water table. And
Wow.
then you have water for the dry season. You can pump out water and you can grow a second crop. So it's like doubling your income. Instead of growing one crop, suddenly they're growing 2 crops. And then when you have a drought, you've got enough water banked in the aquifer to last you, 2-3 years of drought. So, I mean, it's like mind-blowingly vast and rapid shift in the well-being of an entire region.
That's quite insane, isn't it? Really. I mean, it's that's great that they're doing that type of stuff, and it's makes a huge difference to lives and livelihoods and everything. That's amazing.
Yeah. So from a design perspective, we would be like, what are the leverage points in Norway, right? How can farmers actually make more money while being regenerative, right? And this is the design questions that we would ask of, what is the smallest action that actually is like sort of a pivot point, a leverage point that actually can change things. And of course, again, like back to fertilizer, it could be that this is the year that farmers are more open than they have ever been, potentially because of fertilizer costs. I don't know.
Yeah, diesel. They're expecting diesel to almost double in price, or potentially doubling in price. So you need less input factors to get more or less at least the same out.
Yeah.
So yeah, I wish somebody was planning to do a festival that would talk something about learning how to do that. But I don't know.
Yeah.
That's a good idea.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
Yeah.
No, because it's interesting what you're saying, because the climate is changing a little bit up here in Norway, and it's been noticeable because like last year there's been some. I saw another clip of you called it your favorite permaculture farm. You were driving there you haven't visited the guy for the longest time or something.
Yeah,
and he was living in like a hillside there. So and I noticed that because he was also talking about, like, in the wintertime we have shitloads of water. We have, like I said, I got a small farm here and it's full of water out in the I would be embarrassed to show you that thing, but it's it's full of water in part of the season, and then in summertime it's desert season, right? So we have a peninsula close to here where a lot of channelization politics have made it so that it's they're mostly growing the vegetables for this area in Norway, and several other places in Norway as well. And they had huge fields of broccoli die this summer because it was scorching heat. I think it was the same time you had the heat wave. It was infected here as well. So it was like, how can we? that's one thing, and erosion is a big factor here with the monocropping and they're plowing in the autumn so a lot, so it's running off in the springtime and stuff. So I also made a little mental note about that key line zigzag creek structure that he had, and it was claiming that it was capturing or keeping a lot of the good stuff, nutritions there. So a lot of words now, but take it where you want to go with it.
Well, Don Tipping is the guy, Seven Seeds Farm, and Don is an absolutely brilliant permaculture practitioner and farm designer. And so using that slope, right, and really keeping water high in the landscape. And that's a very arid climate where he's in. People have this idea that Oregon is wet, but it's really Oregon is wet seasonally. It's very dry in the summer, especially Southern Oregon. It's more like Northern California. So it's very dry summers. And so, but basically through keeping water high in the landscape, storing water in many different cascading storages and zigzagging that water across the landscape, Don basically created water resilience on the farm. And as I'm looking at the map here of Norway while I'm talking to you, and I mean, there's a lot of elevation change. There's a lot of hills and mountains, and it looks like, you've got your agricultural valleys are in your lowlands around the fjords, and then you've got a lot of elevation around them. So, I mean, and there's I can see a lot of lakes up in those elevation areas, but you have the components. You've got rain, you've got slope, and then in the lowlands, you have your farm. So even on a larger system level, you could, if of course, then you run into the complexity of property ownership and all, the crisscross and zigzag of human imposed management lines. So, you have to have collaboration between landowners, or you have to work on people that have a lot of property, So it seems like you certainly have the conditions to have total water security there. And then, I mean, the climate extremes like you're talking about, and this is it's all over the world. It's extreme weather events, and that's not going to let up. And so, a permaculture system is about creating a resilient system. And part of the resilience is through diversity. And part of it is when you have the whole field or the whole farm is broccoli, and you have an extreme heat wave, and the threshold for that broccoli's optimum growth is surpassed, and whether it bolts fast or whether it withers and dies, or whether you have some extreme hailstorm or something. I mean, there's lots of different extremes that can ruin a particular crop. So the permaculture philosophy is resilience through diversity. So maybe you don't have just one crop. Maybe, and this is like a kind of a rule of thumb thing that Bill Mollison said at one point, but maybe you have 20 crops that support your income. Now, it's not as easy to manage 20 crops because you have to do different things for those crops. But if you have 20 or even 5 different crops, if you have a crop failure in one year, well, perhaps the conditions are such that you will have a bumper crop in another. So you're hedging your bets in a sense, right? So that would be one answer to, well, maybe if it wasn't all broccoli, maybe if you also had tree crops incorporated, you also had poultry that maybe you could send in and make something of the broccoli. Maybe the broccoli gets destroyed as a crop, but there's still enough mass there that you could feed a bunch of chickens or ducks or geese or something like that. So when we look at permaculture systems, we see diversity, we see diverse crops, we see integration of animals and trees and cropping systems. So we've got annuals, we've got perennials, we've got livestock, and you got all these different components. And so the concept is that a diverse system like that is more ready to weather those shocks. It's like a shock absorbers. The system has shock absorbers. Same thing goes, and this is something that's come up here for a project that I've been supporting here on a local farm, which is taking this wet, swampy area that's very unpredictable for cropping and putting it in trees. an agroforestry system, which then becomes a refuge for livestock during extreme heat. Right. So that's another thing. Is like, you're like, okay, well, let's say you have livestock. If you don't have trees, then your livestock is then vulnerable when you have an extreme heat wave that could potentially, well, not just kill, but when you get to a certain heat level, livestock it's under stress and it's not putting on weight. So you're not making any money because they're just like surviving, panting, right? So there's a lot of design stuff that you can do on a farm to basically create diversity, and create other yields, and also create systems that are going to provide those shock absorbers for your extreme weather events. And it's going to be different in every place. In the tropics, you're talking about extreme heat. You're talking about extreme rainfall events. For you, I mean, maybe already extreme cold is like, you don't even consider that because that's the baseline, or maybe it gets even colder. But then extreme heat, like, yeah, how prepared are you at 64 degrees latitude for high temperatures? I mean, that's, everything probably just fries really fast there.
Yeah, it's long days, it's early sunrise, late sunset, and high temperatures. So it's quite a stress based system.
What temperatures are you talking about, just out of curiosity?
Well, we're talking mid 30s.
Okay.
Celsius,
that's Celsius rather than Fahrenheit. I don't know what it is in Fahrenheit.
Yeah. So I still, I study like a lot of stuff, but I still have to go and look it up, right? So 35 Celsius, so 95 degrees. Right, you're just not ready for 95 Fahrenheit. Yeah,
yeah, but I mean, some years it gets to 30 degrees, so that will get to like the mid 80s, I guess that is, and it will be like that for a few days, and then last summer it was pretty much a couple of weeks where it was in the 30s to mid 30s, and it was probably a month of exceptionally hot weather and no real rainfall. And this area is an area where you wouldn't really consider any challenges around water because it's a very wet area. We get a lot of rain here, but actually it just goes to show the relationship between systems and how fragile those systems are, as you said, and the need for resilience around it.
Yeah, it was funny because when I was talking about how I was 45 degrees latitude, and you were like, "Oh, I'm so envious of you being at 45 degrees latitude," I'm like, well, it actually can go the other way too, because where I am at, the climate change is extreme. I mean, the heat now coming up, like, California heat is becoming Oregon heat's becoming Washington, like the heat we're having, and then the associated wildfires. Once the ecosystem reaches a certain level of dry, dehydration, and then you get some extreme wind event, and suddenly you've got the components for, like in 2020, we had these unreal fires. Nobody imagined that we would have fires of that level. And suddenly you go, gosh, there's a lot of biomass in these forests.
And same in Australia a few years ago as well. There was in Sydney, there were those really big fires. Well, actually all across Australia, and I think we've seen them in Canada and all over.
Yeah, and I guess then you'd ask, could Norway, could your ecosystem get to a point where it could carry fire? Like, is that
we have fires here. Yeah, we have fires here because the ground gets dry, and actually we have fires that travel under the ground through the root systems as well. So there are that people here are very, very careful about having fires and stuff in the summer, outside fires in the summer, because it's a lot of the dry leaves on the ground, and it doesn't take much.
No, it's actually funny you're saying that, or not funny at all. But yesterday there was a huge fire in Ålesund. On the whole hill behind Ålesund was on fire almost. So
wow.
Yeah.
Even in March.
Yeah, but it's so now we got like 6 degrees Celsius outside or something these days right now. So it didn't used to be though, but it is right now. So it's getting, and it's been, yeah, I don't know what happened there though, but it was huge fire. I hope they put it out. I haven't checked the news today.
Wow.
So Andrew, I've got a few sort of questions that I've been thinking about. The permaculture, you know, when you look at the principles of permaculture, how long term do people need to be thinking? So if you're a farmer, or if you are, you know, somebody at home that's looking to adopt and starting to look at perennials and permaculture systems, we're clearly not looking at a 1 or a 2 year plan. So what and also the scale of it, you know, it's like how long term do people need to be thinking about this?
Yeah. Well, interesting. My permaculture teacher, Tim Murphy, for my advanced permaculture class that I took, again, still through Prescott College, he had a little saying. He said, "Create a good ruin." Right? So you should plan your system that when you're long gone and dead, it will still be a benefit to the watershed. So from that perspective, you're planning like you're looking at 1,000 years. I mean, you're looking at like, how do we create new systems that are going to permanently increase abundance for nature, for humans? So that's the kind of macro scale. Now, any permaculture system, you're going to have like these, it's going to be scaled. I mean, it's going to be not scaled, it's going to be segmented by time. So you might say, well, I'm going to have very quick yields. You know, I'm going to plant like radishes. I'm going to have a yield in, 45 days kind of thing. But then you're going to have short-term, mid-term, long-term, like you're looking at the time span of a system. You're looking at like, you need to get something out of it pretty quick, because you can't just put a bunch of investment in and not get a yield, right? So, short-term yield is going to be like probably annual or short-term perennial crops. But, when I am drawing out a design, right, when I'm making a plan, I am drawing out the circumference of the trees that I'm drawing on paper. I am drawing them out at their mature state, at like, a 30-year tree size kind of thing. One of the common mistakes that people make is they plant too close with perennials, and then you're like, oh no, I planted these trees at their 8-year size, but here we are 20 years later and they're way too close. So, I look at like, I think that's looking at like a generational time frame as far as your spacing of plantings. And like I was talking about this project in the Kaveri River Basin in South India, they're basically putting trees in that they're going to harvest at 20 or 30 years, right? I think that's, most people, you're either looking at your own life, or you're looking at your children or your grandchildren or young people. I think that's a good time frame on the long term. But also, how are you going to immediately start to recover your costs? How are you going to create short-term food security? So for a lot of people, I mean, if you're like in an urban area, you might just be like, how do I create food security now? You're looking at the prices going up of everything right now. You have an apartment. You're like, how do I actually turn my apartment balcony or my patio? How do I like grow the herbs I use for cooking in my kitchen, and grow like kale and turnips and salad greens and peas and tomatoes? Right now it's March 19th. How can I by July have food? So that's another, time frame that you could look at this. And I think it really depends on what kind of resources you have and what kind of what kind of scale of your system is, about what your goals are going to be. And then your time frame is going to be related to what your goals are.
Yeah. Okay. What are your views as well, just with regards? I mean, you're talking about what to grow and where, based on when you plan to use it, and having some short, medium, and long term objectives around that. I'm just wondering, as you were talking then, what's the importance, or is there any relationship between local heritage seeds and species versus what's becoming more common around genetically modified seeds and more disease resistant enabled seeds and species? What are your views on that?
Yeah, well, typically in permaculture, we encourage land races. Like what are the climatically adapted indigenous species for your area. Now, part of that is the fact that industrial agriculture has narrowed the genetic window so much that we went from, 4,000 apple varieties to 16, so there are a lot of really important latent qualities to crops that have adapted in a particular region for a long period of time, right? So they are used to experiencing and yielding, producing yields through the various extremes that naturally cycle through a place, right? So preservation of traditional crop varieties, traditional seed varieties, heirloom seed varieties is like very important. And of course, generating a market for those. Now, I try not to be an absolutist. Okay. So I don't want to say that there is zero place for genetic modification in the world. I think that's just a little, just like I wouldn't say that there is zero place for pesticides or herbicides, or, like if you look at particular situations, many different cases, you kind of like make a case for why some particular technology is useful. However, it's in a large part, it's about what your intentions are and how evolved we are as people. So it could be that as a species, we are not really evolved enough to responsibly use genetically modified organisms. That like we're so profit driven that this technology, we can only use it to increase profit in the forefront of what we're doing, and that we're just like not, like you might say, spiritually mature enough to use these technologies responsibly. You might say the same thing about AI. You're like, wow, AI. You're like, I don't think as a species right now we're like spiritually evolved enough to responsibly use AI. But I don't think that AI itself is necessarily inherently evil. So I guess I'm just saying that like I'm not an absolutist like that. But if we go and we have this profit-based these profit-based motivations for contracting the genetic seed base and only making these particular, we've brought it down to these few varieties, that is a pathway to insecurity.
Yeah.
Right. So we need to keep these. And actually, I mean, you guys have Svalbard.
Yeah.
Right. And so
we don't personally, but yeah,
right.
It's there.
You can't just knock on the door in Svalbard.
No,
just let
afraid not.
You in?
No,
Okay.
afraid not.
Yeah, you can go there, but you can. It's not our stuff.
Yeah. I've been discussing going and visiting, documenting a project down in Peru called the Potato Park, where it is like the Noah's Ark of landrace potato species. They have something like 1,400 potato varieties there.
Wow.
In this park that they're preserving. And I believe that it's the first indigenous addition to Svalbard that is like this indigenous people own the genetics, and that they are, I'm not exactly sure what the legal thing is, but that these potato seed varieties are making it into Svalbard, but are being the ownership is being maintained by the indigenous groups there.
Yeah, I think that's a good thing is around the ownership of it, and I'm not sure Svalbard can brag about the same non-profit driven ownership.
Yeah. So yeah. So it's complicated, but we need to preserve the traditional. And that's actually I did my whole master's degree on preserving heirloom fruit trees in the high desert of Arizona. So, finding these varieties that are withstanding the test of time, withstanding the droughts, withstanding the temperature spikes,
Yeah.
withstanding the cold. And when you have species like that are and varieties that are like have proven themselves over time, I mean, that's very valuable. And we can't just like let those varieties die out because we've sort of been taught to value as consumers only a very narrow window of qualities of different fruits, like the red delicious apple, for instance, something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So just on the permaculture side, so I think you said earlier that if people are interested in looking at these systems and the relationship between systems and adopting some of those practices, that doing some type of course and doing some research on it would be beneficial for them. So obviously you've got a lot of materials on your channel. So where can people find you online, and where can they start watching those videos?
Yeah. So my YouTube channel is just my name, Andrew Millison. And so there's a lot there. I've traveled to many countries around the world and done lots of different stories about some really of the most progressive systems I can find. Through Oregon State University, we offer online permaculture design courses. And so if you just type in OSU permaculture, you'll come to us, right? And then I also have a philanthropic organization that I've begun called the Earth Repair Fund, where I'm actually using my YouTube videos as fundraising, crowdfunding tools to fund directly for work on the ground. So we published our first of the Earth Repair videos for with an indigenous group in Hawaii that is restoring their traditional watershed-based food system. We've already raised over $46,000 for that project, and we've got a lot more videos that we are publishing that I've already filmed that we're publishing as fundraising directly for the project. So if you go to earthrepair.fund, then you could actually contribute to that effort, or just go and check out the Hawaii video on my channel, the most recent one. How Hawaiian rebels are rebuilding an ancient food paradise. It's kind of a wordy name. That's the title. You like that one?
I recommend that one. It's so cool.
Yeah, it's it's
all those golf courses and everything. Rebels, love it.
Well, it's another one of your zigzagging water systems.
Yeah,
basically.
Yeah. And the way they've been able to move those huge rocks back in the days. Yeah, no, I'm not going to spoil it for people. They're going to go watch it themselves. It's all the channels and all the links below here. So
I was
going
to say those are my three things right now: my YouTube channel, my Oregon State University permaculture classes, and the Earth Repair Fund. That's the three things that I'm focused on right now.
Perfect. And I'm wondering, like, what water cup kind of biodiversity challenge thing should we create out there? How can we make a water cup to preserve, so we make sure that there's not only 5 races of each type of vegetable and stuff down the line?
Yeah. So the question is, this is sort of your design challenge is for the culture of Norway. What is the thing that would create inspiration and interest among the people that you're trying to influence? Farmers, small farmers, right? Now, with India, it was a competition between villages. Is there a competition between farmers that is something that they could get inspired about? Or what are the prizes, right? What can they actually win? And I mean, for if you're restoring the water in a village in India, well, you win a restored water system, but also there was big cash prizes put put out by Amir Khan, so the villages actually won a lot of money too, if they were the winners. So the question for you, it's sort of like you get into like social design, right? What is the leverage point in Norway that you could actually inspire people? And once you create a contest, is it competition? Maybe people in Norway are so cooperative that having a competition would not be an incentive. I don't know. You know better than I do. But that's your sort of social design challenge, or the social design challenge of people listening to this. It's like, what is, you have a big ship and then you have a rudder, right? And the rudder turns the ship. But they realize that if you have this giant rudder turning the ship, well, all you have to do is you put a little miniature rudder on the big rudder. It's called the trim tab. So you turn the little tiny rudder turns the big rudder, and then the big rudder turns the ship. So that's the analogy for you. It's like, what is the trim tab? What's the tiny rudder that you could devise that could actually either bring in a new production method, or inspire farmers in a competition, or whatever it is, right? So it's it's not just equal. Yeah.
When you're talking about sort of tiny rudders and competition, I'm thinking maybe we have to offer Daniel out as a dinner date for farmers as competition. maybe that's what it is.
Exactly.
Yeah, tiny rudders.
Or some kind of calendar. Like, what do people in Norway like? I've never been to Norway, but like people in America like calendars with like scantily dressed farmers. I don't know. What's the thing? I don't know. That's what, like, with the YouTube channel, I'm just like, what? I'm always thinking, I'm like, this is actually my question right here that I have written here. I was playing this game. My question is, it's how can I tap into the stream of collective unconscious, right? What is the thing that can be introduced to society that's like latent, that's just that people are going to really respond to? It could be something easy, like a competition, or what is it?
The Tinder to spark that flame.
Yeah, but I mean, I think where those are very much sort of the pulling tactics of people being drawn into something through competition and awareness, whereas I think actually people are being pushed into it because of world events. So I think I think half the work is probably done, because I think a lot of people are now starting to get, even just food security. Everybody knows that food, you take countries like Norway, most of the food is imported. Everything relies on oil. Most stuff is imported. One farm is closing every day. People know this stuff. So actually I think there's a bit of a push towards being more self-sufficient. Farmers, I remember 2 or 3 years ago, were really struggling with the increasing cost over chemicals for farming. So God knows how it's going to be this year, but well, put it this way, it's not going to get any cheaper, is it, anytime soon? So if you're a farmer, your energy costs are going to go up, your diesel costs are going to go up, your chemical treatments are going to go up, your staff salaries are going to go up. And we live in a capitalist society, so the supermarkets are just going to screw you over on what they'll pay you for your produce.
And so maybe it's food sovereignty. Maybe this is the year that Norway food sovereignty really takes off. It's interesting, because we have to be careful with using nationalism as too much of an incentive, because that can turn ugly. I mean, here, I'm living in the United States, where it's like the whole like make America great again, right? So it's sort of this like land-based nationalism, but then it turns so ugly against immigrants. So it's like you have to be careful, like using nationalism as your leverage point, just because of it can be very poisonous in a lot of ways. But at the same time, you have to think about that. It's like food sovereign Norway. It's like, proud. Could Norway be proud of producing the food that Norway, or some percentage of the food that Norway needs. That may be a leverage point.
It's an economic challenge. It's like the US is a wealthy nation, right? So you can just buy stuff. Norway is one of the richest countries per person in the world, and it's used to just go, well, we'll just buy it, because the quality of life, the salaries, everything is getting higher and higher. So actually, the expectation in wealthy countries is, well, we're not a producer, we're a consumer. We just buy it in. And the old sort of historic ways of being a producer rather than a consumer, or a producer and a consumer, the production side is just dying off. And it's only once you're on the consumer side that actually it's becoming hard to buy stuff and more expensive to buy it in, that you start looking and going, why aren't we producing stuff anymore?
Yeah, absolutely. And so when do you get to a point where views like that go from being fringe views to being mainstream views? And that's, certainly with the energy shocks that are happening right now, there's a window for views like that to go mainstream.
Yeah, it's amazing, isn't it, that you have a view based on logic needs to become a mainstream view rather than a fringe one.
Well, it's really easy to buy stuff from all over the place when international shipping, everything is just humming right along. Humming right along and creating, insane imbalance of carbon in the atmosphere. So, humming right along is relative, but, it's like, can we learn from these shocks? Or, at what point, how shocking does it need to get before we realize that food, that we're really like, places should basically strive to have maximized production of what is, consumed there?
Yeah. But we also have these, going back to economics, we also have these trade agreements where, you've seen where we are. Our onions here come from New Zealand.
Wow.
Yeah, that was my reaction when I moved here. Garlic comes from China, onions come from New Zealand. Yeah, the furthest places away, and you think whatever we as individuals do to reduce our carbon footprint and to be good, responsible citizens, trade agreement over onions coming from New Zealand, you're there going, we're not going to make any impact. And we're in such a globalized society where economically an onion farmer in Norway is competing with an onion farmer in New Zealand. How insane is that from a global competition point of view? That's even on the table to discuss, let alone actually feasible, let alone happening.
Yeah. And, when I look at Norway here, and I just had a meeting yesterday or the day before with somebody working in Nigeria, right? And we were talking about Nigeria, and not for onions and garlic, but Nigeria is a huge wet, we were talking about the amount of food that could be produced in Africa, and Africa's proximity to Europe. You just start, even if you're still going to have global exports going, New Zealand is really far away from Norway.
Yeah.
You could just be like, okay, let's look, if we just superimpose the onion growing regions of the world, I think that there are really a lot of onion growing regions that are a whole lot closer to Norway.
Including Norway.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, it could just be that the energy, that a lot of this logic is only going to come about at $120 a barrel oil.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, which is not far
Fingers
off.
crossed.
Well, look, Andrew, I think we've taken up enough of your time, and really appreciate you going through all of this in detail. It's interesting just for both Daniel and I, it's stuff that we find really interesting and can talk about probably for too long. But I guess just as a sort of closing remark, what are your thoughts on the importance of events like the Jord Festival for knowledge sharing and pulling people in together and sort of celebrating biodiversity and regeneration and those types of things?
Yeah, I think that people gathering together in person is just, it's the tonic for a lot of the digital focus of the modern world. I feel like community is built really strongly when people get together, and especially getting together around a purpose like the Jord Festival, regenerative agriculture, and people seeing examples in the flesh and people talking through things. I think it's really wonderful. And I would only hope that there was festivals like that all over the place. I think like educational festivals focused around food and also celebration and, farming systems. I mean, I think that that's just, I'm just hoping that we see more and more of that, really. Yeah.
So we're hoping to create a bit of a footprint out of it and try to inspire some others and get some sort of like some satellite versions of the Jord Festival going across Norway and all across Scandinavia and Northern Europe, because it's from our point of view, it's not just a festival for us. It's the whole point of it is to disseminate knowledge and education, build communities and do that type of stuff. So that's our aim anyway. We'll see how we get on.
Yeah, and I hope to someday see you in Trondheim.
Yeah, that would be amazing. That would be really good. But yeah, I mean, for now, yeah, really appreciate your time and your expertise and for joining us on this and being part of the journey, even though you're far away, not able to join the actual event itself. Yeah, like you say, hopefully one day you will.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah. All right. Well, hey, it was really, really nice talking to you both, and I appreciate it, and best of luck in the festival and all of your work out there.
Likewise.
Thanks again, Andrew.
Thanks for your time and your inspiration in general.
Awesome.
Be good.
All right. Talk to you guys later.
Cheers.